And we are good to go. Welcome, everybody. This is Matt Kinsman, Head of Content at Connectiv. I'd like to welcome you to the Connectiv Digital Media Council. We're going to be having a great presentation today on getting the most out of your CDP, featuring Natalie Williams and Kyle Smith of Brief Media. We're also going to be having an open discussion on GDPR prep. The deadline is coming at us quickly. We're going to pick up on the conversation from our last meeting on responses to Google Chrome ad standards. What else have we learned since then? And really any topics that you guys want to cover today. And with that, I'm going to introduce our chair, Roberta Muller. Roberta, take it away.
Hi, guys. How are you? Glad you can all join. Remember, *7 unmutes you. So, yes, we have a full agenda today. Let's flip over to the next slide. Oh, what a technical world we live in. So we've been doing a lot of research here at North Star on our MarTech stack and looking at CDPs and looking at ESPs, marketing automation tools, etc. You guys probably all know the landscape out there. So question for everybody, and you might have to unmute yourself to answer, but can anybody take a guess at about how many marketing technology solutions there are in the marketplace? Any ideas, anybody? And you can *7 to unmute yourself. All right. So, bigger than a bread box, I think. Let's hit the next slide. We got a
guess of 5,000. I see
5,000.
15,000 and 5,000 again.
All right. Those 5,000 are close to the winners. Let's hit the next slide. So yes, as you can see, with that painful diagram that makes your eyes bleed, there is definitely no shortage of marketing technology solutions out there. They had actually, I was reading an article, and I gave you guys the article down at the bottom, the link, if you want to follow up on that. There was actually a 40% growth just between 2016 and 17 of new products being added into the marketplace. So we're at 5,300 different products out there, and it's amazing. As I was reading the article, I mean, the churn rate at which software is kind of falling out of the market can't even keep up with the churn of new technology coming on the market. So definitely not even keeping up with the speed, I think, at which customers are jumping aboard, because it's not inexpensive software. And it requires business and process review. It requires technical hands to be in there as well. So it's definitely not something that you're just going to kind of slap in a day or two and call it a day. So definitely not a shortage of solutions out there. So we did a little prep work before beginning of this year, kind of looking at our MarTech stack, as I'm sure probably a lot of you are. Let's flip over to the next slide. And I just wanted to share with you, some of the places where we did some of our research. There was a site, the Customer Data Platform Institute, which has got some really great articles and some takeaways that you can look at. When we were looking at CDPs specifically, and we were looking at some of the big names across the industry, we're looking at BlueConic, we were looking at Lytics, we were looking at Telium, and a couple others. We personally ended up we are in the process of, we've implemented Telium. We're at the point now where we're going through the use cases to see, just to make sure we can monetize it with all of the integrations we needed. But I would have to agree that I think marketing these days is really hard, especially since it's spread out between, mobile and social, and email is still hanging in there and isn't going away. I would also say that a lot of conversations we have with our customers, right? So when we're talking to our customers about data, I mean, we still have customers that say, well, all our data is in our CRM. And that doesn't help much. I mean, I know we use Salesforce, and there's no way Salesforce is slicing and dicing and really giving you the view and the aggregate of the data that you want to look at when you want to start thinking about your marketing strategies for your clients and for your own events. And plus, I find CRM data, I see our salespeople in Salesforce.com or some other CRM, and let's be honest, how many really keep their data clean, right? It's painful looking at some of the data in Salesforce. And we've also here at Northstar have gone through marketing automation tools. There's a part of our business that is using Pardot. They went from Marketo to Pardot. We are still in Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And I find even when we were looking at Pardot, it solves the problems that we were having with event marketing, but when it comes to newsletters, totally different animal, right? So when it comes to third-party marketing, totally different animal, because there's a lot of slicing and dicing and kind of looking at our data that we couldn't even get to in a Pardot. So definitely I think these are things to think about as you're exploring CDPs, if you're in the process of it, or if you've already landed on one. So, and I gave you another link to a webinar that we looked at a while back, which I thought was a little bit helpful. Let's switch over to the next slide. So when we were looking at our project and we were going through the selection of our CDP, we started with, where is all of our data? And I'd have to say I think we were lucky, because the bulk of all of our audience data is in our audience database, which we use knowledge marketing for, and we can get very granular in there, kind of looking at the data and the overlaps in data. So if you haven't really taken that opportunity to sit down with your team, it really is good to make sure you look at where all your data is, where it lives, and what is the key data that you need to be kind of focusing in on? Because I know we collect a lot of data, from our circulation forms, but not all of it is, are we really hanging our hat on, right? So we really wanted to look at the fields and the integrity of the fields and the integrity of the data that we had on very specific fields that we knew later on that our audience would be looking for. So definitely, make sure you take the time to really get down and dirty with your data, prior to you picking your CDP. And let's flip over to the next slide. And another thing that we looked at, we try to look at before we sign any contracts with any vendor is, what are the KPIs are we looking at? It's one thing to spend money and make an investment on a technology solution, but you really need to make sure you could justify that, and how are you going to justify that? And that's looking at, we looked at the quality of our data, the health, the overall health of our data. We looked at current engagement and where we lacked engagement and what we thought we needed to do to bring that level up. We also looked at, how much are we spending on keeping our data clean. Once we put in a new tool like a CDP, what does that mean? Do I need more money later on for more heavier integrations? Can I get some economy scales across maybe a different piece of software that we might be able to phase out? So all really good short and long-term things that you want to think about as you start to really flush out through the weeds, through those 5,000 technology solutions that are out there on the industry. So with that being said, I'd really like to introduce to you Natalie Williams, who's the COO over at Brief Media, and Kyle Smith, who is the Digital Strategy Manager, which I love that title. I think we actually need one of those at Northstar. And they're new to Connectiv, so we want to give them a great big welcome. We're glad you joined our family, because we can all learn off of each other. And they're going to take us through, their process for implementing and selecting their CDP and, lessons learned, which is really great for all of us. So with that, I'll mute myself, and let's let Natalie and Kyle take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Roberta. This is Natalie Williams. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Brief Media. I'm joined by Kyle Smith, who is our Digital Strategy Manager. Before I assumed the role of Chief Operating Officer, I managed our audience database as well as our digital teams. And Kyle started off at Brief as a front-end developer. He's been a product manager for us and moved into the Digital Strategy Manager role, which I agree is a great title for him. Kyle and I have worked together on projects really for the last 3 years, starting with, we two at the time had the knowledge marketing unified audience database, and we worked on cleaning that up and doing some integrations there. We've added new vendors to our MarTech stack since that time, and then last year went through the process of changing systems. So we're now about a year in on having Omida as our primary audience database. So Kyle and I have worked together on a lot of these types of projects and implementations, but my disclaimer for this is that our proof of concept period for our CDP, BlueConic, that we chose just ended in February. So we're literally 6 weeks in, but we feel like we have some good things to offer for those of you, especially who are considering CDP, the lessons that we learned, kind of what steps we went through. We can go ahead and advance the slide there. So the topics that we want to cover today are why we decided to add a CDP to our marketing technology stack, what the implementation process has looked like for us. We've had some, as I said, we're 6 weeks in, so some early experiments and wins, and then we have some things that we want to do next. And then we'll also have time at the end for some Q&A, and if there are others on the call who have experience with CDP, that would be a great time. We'd love to hear some of your experiences as well. The first thing, as Roberta mentioned, there's no shortage of marketing technology providers, and this probably happens to none of you, but if your CEO comes back from a conference and hears that everyone else is using CDPs, and when are we going to do one? What are we doing about this? What do we know about this? And if that hasn't happened to you yet and your CEO is going to the Connectiv Summit, we're giving you about a month head start to be prepared for those questions. But before we just jump in on a new technology, I think it's really important to know, and Roberta touched on this a little bit already, know your goals. So as you're evaluating new technology, we like to look at how does this save money for us, make money for us, or solve a problem that we have, and how does it add value to or complement the resources that we already have. When we started talking to CDP providers, a lot of what we heard is the topic of being able to help people convert unknown to known, which for us at Brief, that's not our primary use case or goal for CDP, although it's a great one. Our websites are gated, and so we have already more than 110,000 identifiable profiles of people that have filled out. We've got a little bit of a sample here, but there a lot of demographic data. We have their job title, their business type, and those types of questions. So our problem that we were trying to solve was not the unknown to known, but more of how can we make the data that we already have more actionable and in more ways. We got some good advice from CDP provider that we chose, BlueConic. They said there's so many things that a CDP can do. Focus on some initial use cases, master those, win those, and then move on. Don't try to bite off too much at one time. So as a starting point, we focused more for our implementation on some internal use cases. There are absolutely ways that we plan to roll this out to our clients and productize it a little bit more, but before we get into that, we wanted to make sure that we're doing this well with our own. So Kyle will be showing some use cases, but we're using it to make money with our paid products and events. We have some use cases to help us save money. We still have audited journals, so we spend a lot of money on telemarketing for new business and recalls, so some use cases to save money there. And then problems that we have, either whether it's something with GDPR or a problem that we have right now. We've got a lot of capabilities with marketing segmentation, but as we've added more paid products and more events, even with targeted email, you can only send so much email, so being able to really deliver those one-to-one marketing messages so that you're not exhausting your data would be a problem that we were solving. We'll move on. So our main, what I would call kind of the main players in our marketing technology stack right now, Omeda is the biggest one for us. They handle our journal circulation, our email deployments send from there. We're running their Olytics product, which helps us track website behavior, not only for all of those gated profiles that I mentioned that we have, but also anyone that receives email from our system or subscribes to a journal through that platform. So we've got a lot of data coming in there that's great demographic information on our audience, as well as behavioral things, opens, clicks, and contextual, what topics they're engaging with on our websites, specific URLs that they visited and timeframes, those kinds of things. ActiveCampaign is what we're using to run some marketing automation. It also has some CRM and tagging capabilities, but we're primarily using it for some automations. And then mixpanel has been a fun one for us. It's more about what's happening in real time on the site, behaviors, whereas Omeda, we're looking at maybe URLs or topics. Mixpanel, we can get on there in a live view and see what sections of a page someone's viewing, what they're searching. We really see more what's going on there. So for us, where BlueConic comes in is bringing all of those things into one place, as I mentioned, so we can take more action on our data and in different ways. All right, the next thing that I would recommend is obviously have a plan, but what does that mean? So as Roberta mentioned, any of these marketing technologies that you're implementing, it's not something that you just, okay, we have it, flip a switch, it's on, it's working. I wish that it worked that way, but not at all. This diagram that you see here is one of Kyle's creations. And it is all, and Roberta mentioned this too, kind of all the places that we have data currently and all the pieces that need to be able to talk to each other. We started out with our internal use cases, and so when we were doing this documentation, we kind of thought through, in order for those use cases to be successful, which pieces of data need to be able to connect together in order to make that happen. So as part of the plan, having that real need for a CDP, determining your goals, what are some of those use cases that you would like to see in order for it to be beneficial, reviewing documentation from any of the vendors that you're considering. For me, this was a big one, and not to pick on salespeople, but in a lot of these conversations, when we're saying, okay, we have mixpanel, we have ActiveCampaign, we have Omeda, we would need for this data to be able to work in this way, and you get a lot of like, oh, we should be able to make that work, and that's not a good enough answer. For me, if we're going to spend and make the investment, I need to understand how that could potentially work. And in a lot of cases, our CDP already had a connection, for example, with Omeda, so that was great. But even then, we needed to understand some of the details for our particular data. But ActiveCampaign and mixpanel were not, at the time that we were jumping in, active integrations that they had. So we needed to get our technical people on the phone, in some cases even with mixpanel or ActiveCampaign and BlueConic, and really we wanted to make sure not that it should work, but that we had a plan for how it could work, that internal documentation. And then, as you can tell from that, this requires technical resources. So it's making sure that all these pieces work and flow together.
Okay, thanks, Natalie. So what I'd like to talk about from here is how we actually implemented this. So as Natalie said and Roberta said, you needed to have a plan and you needed to have a proper use case. So when you actually decide to work on this project, the very first thing you have to have is a vision for how the infrastructure needs to work. Without this vision, it's very difficult to connect the systems as you need them to work to meet your in-game product. So you need to map everything out, just like the previous slide shows, where you can tell developers or external resources how you want the data to funnel into each other system, so that by the end, the goal is that you have a unified audience database. You also need to have a goal with verifiable measures of success. So for us, and with BlueConic, this was great, we really needed a proof of concept period where we could say, okay, we trust that your system can do what it says it can do, but now we need to see if we can make it work with our other technology stacks and how we define our business model. This proof of concept period for us was 90 days, where we worked closely with the developers at BlueConic. We also worked with our developers internally, and we had phone calls constantly verifying that this is actually going to be successful. And if for whatever reason it wasn't successful, we knew ahead of time before we signed a large contract for a system that wasn't going to work for us. The internal resources for your company is a vital part of making the systems work together. You need to have a deep understanding of how your own systems work, how your current technology stacks work with other marketing automation systems, and then also understanding how the new systems work and how you want them to integrate. You have to provide that direction to whoever you're working with, so that they know what is expected out of them and they know how to pair the systems together. And then finally, just without internal resources technology, you also need internal resources on verifying the data that you have all coming together. We have a senior audience manager who really helps me verify that all of the information that is funneling into each system is accurate, timely, and without error. That's the most important part, because if your data is wrong or dirty, then none of this matters, right? So that portion goes alongside the proof of concept to make sure that everything you have is accurate. Once we got BlueConic installed, were installing it, we had an idea of what we wanted it to do. So we had all of these different systems. We had mixpanel, we had ActiveCampaign, we had Omeda, but all of these things did independent pieces, and they did them well, but we needed a unified system, or what I called the data warehouse, that could reach users across all of our platforms or all of our products. So with BlueConic, we can funnel everything in there and then take action on it on the website, in our apps, with our newsletters, with our journals, and with marketing funnels. Now that we have information from all of our different products, we can then take action on it and then reach the customer with where they're engaging. So as I said earlier, with the different systems, each one housed a different type of data. So mixpanel housed behavioral data, Omeda housed publication data, ActiveCampaign housed marketing funnel information, and we needed to collate all of that information into a unified profile. Originally, before we started with BlueConic, we had just email, if someone's gender type or what their job role was. And then with BlueConic, we can take all of those pieces of information and tie them together, and then also create new pieces of information based on that. So now we know what topics people are interested in, what their engagement level is, what their interests are at a sub-level, keyword interests. So we can scan articles that they're reading and pick out keywords that are in the articles and suggest content based on those keywords. So instead of saying someone is just interested in dermatology, that could be a different host of topics within dermatology, but Johnny Appleseed here is interested in melanoma specifically. And then we can also see what type of subscriptions they have, if they're a Plum subscriber, which is one of our paid apps, or if they're a print subscriber. And then we can build a different kind of segmentation based on that information. Currently, what we have with all of our systems combined and the new data points that we've created with these new systems, we're up to 273 unique profile properties. Not everyone has 273, but we have 273 pieces of information that we can take action on. Sometimes we combine those pieces of information to create a larger data point, but the more data points we have and the more accurate they are, we can take more interesting actions based on that information to kind of provide the right message at the right time to the right person on the right product. Some of the examples that we had in our proof of concept, what we really needed to make things work. Natalie mentioned earlier that we do requalification for our journals every year using telemarketing. We wanted to see if we could trim the telemarketing budget by reaching our customers on our websites or in our app to say that their subscription is renewing, and here's how you can take care of it effectively right now. So what this message does is it reads the profile of Beth, and it says, hey Beth, your journal subscription is ending in 30 days. Go ahead and renew it now, and we'll take care of it. Not only does this save time for the user, it alerts them that their subscription is ending. It also personalizes it with their name, so they're more likely to read the message. And then it also saves us money in the long term. We can also take a look at what users are interested in outside of just our content. We have a event that we do every year called New York Vet in New York, and so for readers that are reading specific pieces of content, we can serve a message if the author of that article is presenting at New York Vet. In this case, Brad Case is presenting. So what we did was we segmented out all of the different articles on the website that are authored by Brad Case, and then we posted messages for anyone who comes to this article, and then we also tag those people once they come to the article so that we know that these people are interested in Brad Case articles, and we can use that information later on down the road to hit them with either emails or different messaging on the website, print ads, anything like that. Having a piece of data based on their interaction will help us further on.
This one is fun too, to think of the different use cases. As Kyle mentioned, we have all these different data points. One of those being if someone attended New York Vet with us last fall, we have session attendance data. Brad Case was a presenter last year. He's one of the few that will repeat this year. He's a popular surgery speaker. But if we wanted to get really creepy on our targeting, we could even target someone who had attended Brad's session last year, and that messaging could be something like "See Brad speak again," but just the level of targeting that you can do depending on the data points that you have available are pretty cool.
Very cool. Very cool indeed. And so we also wanted to dive deep into how people are subscribing to our paid app, or whether or not they're subscribing to our paid app. And we're getting pieces of information from Recurly, our e-commerce solution for our paid app. And we funnel that into BlueConic, and we started building segmentations based on if somebody is a current subscriber or if they're not a current subscriber. And if they're not a current subscriber, have they canceled or have they expired or anything like that. So what this message does here is it reads the person's profile, it puts their name in the message, and it says, Rodney, subscribe to Plums today and save 20%. And with that 20%, this is just a call to action to go ahead and jump in and see if you enjoy the product. And the way that this message is served is if we don't detect any information from you for Plums, or if you have a canceled or expired subscription, we serve this ad. And if you already have a subscription, then you see nothing. So this went to a very small segmented group of our audience, and this was one of our early and very first experiments and has shown the most success. We put a coupon code in the actual live message that we sent out, and that coupon code outperformed some of our other messaging that we sent out through traditional marketing messages, and we saw an immediate increase in revenue just based off that one experiment. So we knew that not only was the system working properly, the data was working properly, but we were also proving our concept at the same time and showing actual verifiable results.
Excuse me, Kyle and Natalie, this is Matt. I just want to jump in because we had a question come in through the Q&A tab. And
sure.
While we're going to have Q&A at the end, I thought this might be relevant right now. The question is, are you using BlueConic to actually serve the overlay or another technology?
That's a great question, and thank you, Stephanie, for asking. We're using BlueConic to serve this overlay, and it works across all the systems that BlueConic is connected to, so our website and our app. And this message is what's known as a dialogue, and it's powered off of segmentation and also contextual information of where the person is within our product. And it gives us the ability to serve rich overlays that are highly configurable. So we are lucky enough to have a wonderful design and development team on staff, and anything that we come up with as far as design or functionality within this dialogue, we can do it with the tools that BlueConic provides us. That's one of the reasons why we liked BlueConic, one of the very many, because some systems only allow you to serve stock overlays, but with this system we can design and develop it however we please. And another instance of powering off of users' information off of our e-commerce platform is posting messages within the actual product itself to say that your paid subscription is expiring within a certain amount of time, embedded into the actual code of the website, and allowing users to update their subscription settings right away. This is something that I'm personally very excited about because one of the big numbers that all paid apps go off of is churn. You're always trying to reduce your churn. So this is one way that we can capture and notify people that their profile or their subscription is ending, and hopefully catch them before we need to do a callback or a re-enticement to get them to come back, and we can save that churn percentage right away. Okay. So those are some of the experiments that we're running, but let's talk about what's next. So BlueConic, and in addition to all of our platforms, we have a lot of power that we've harnessed, but we need to come up with different use cases down the road to really leverage them beyond just quick overlay messages. Some of the things that we're wanting to work on are personalized content based on preferences with content affinity. So depending on your profile properties, content on the page may change depending on your interests. So if you're interested in a specific topic, then the recommended articles that are coming up will be relevant to your interests. Personalized profile pages that populate with recommendations and history So your own profile page gives you information not only on what you viewed in the past in case you want to view it again, what your most recent search queries were in case you need to remember what it was that you searched to find a specific article, and then different recommendations based on your different browsing histories. We also want to use our CDP to leverage how we develop for GDPR. That is something that we are intensely working on, and luckily for us, BlueConic helps us with that, with GDPR requirements. But again, all of our systems need to be in compliance, and that is just one portion of it, but it does save us there. And then the other item that we're working on now is, if you notice at the beginning, we showed a paywall or a gate, as it were. All of our articles are free, but you do need to subscribe to our website. We're developing what we're calling a soft gate, which awards users 3 articles when they come to the website, and then they do not see a gate. So similar to New York Times or Washington Post, that gives you free articles per month, and then once they reach a certain limit, they're asked to create a profile with us. So those are just some of the very small things that we're working on, but we're hoping that we get to work on some really exciting things in the future.
And our sales team is chomping at the bit to get their hands on this too, to be able to leverage for our clients. But as I mentioned earlier, I 100% see opportunity there. But before we roll this out to our clients, we really want to perfect our own use cases and make sure that it's working for us internally. And then we'll have different initiatives, probably quarterly, that we try to tackle from here on out.
All right, so I see some questions coming in, so I think that'd be a good segue to jump into the question and answer.
Okay, very good. I see one from Roberta that is, does Omita also handle our paid circulation? Yes, they handle our circulation for our 2 journals, which is a mix of free and paid. The Plums product that Kyle referenced is not does not fall under that. That's something that we manage internally.
Got it.
Kathy asked, what level of designer development do you need to create offers in BlueConic? So BlueConic actually has some tools that they provide for marketers who don't have a background in designer development. So these are easily editable templates. However, since I do have a design and development background, I'm able to do the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript myself. But you certainly don't have to have those skill sets in your pocket to take advantage of some of those great features.
Roberta asked another one talking about describe the team who worked on the project and if they were dedicated. As I mentioned at the beginning, before I moved into the COO role, I was over we had a combined audience and technology team. So I worked on this. Kyle has been the most heavily involved, and then also from our audience team, our senior audience manager who oversees our Omita database and everything there. I think we're the primary 3 working on it. It has required a lot of time from Kyle's perspective, especially with this integration. And then we will be, now that the tools are in place, turning it over more to our brand development and marketing team, that they'll be using it and incorporating it into campaigns going forward. But that's been our initial team to get it up and running.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Excuse me, guys. This is Matt. I just want to jump in. Guys, as you see, there's a couple of different ways we can conduct this Q&A and the discussion after the presentation as well. Several people are submitting questions via the Q&A tab in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Yep. Please feel free to do so. We'd also like this to be a discussion. Okay. So I'm going to cross my fingers. I'm going to unmute all your lines. Yeah. So you can certainly talk directly to all our participants. We welcome you to do that. Please have some noise discipline once I unmute, we can hear everything. So if you need to mute your line, if you're having another conversation, please mute your line. Do not put us on hold, otherwise we can hear your music. So please put us on mute. If we have any issues, I'm going to simply mute everyone again, and then you can hit *7 as an individual to unmute your lines. So here we go. You are unmuted.
The conference has been unmuted.
Here we go.
Hey, this is Roberta. I have a question for you. So I recently went to the Digital Velocity show in New York, which was put on by Telium, kind of like a user conference. And I think the one big takeaway I had from there was that the data is never 100% perfect. Can you talk a little bit about, as you were kind of starting the project and moving chunks of data, I guess, into BlueConic, did it get better over time? Did you get closer to, being able to audience size from basically maybe what you were doing prior in a different tool? What did that look like for you?
That's a great question. So you're absolutely right. The data is never perfect. It relies heavily on user input. So if a user inputs the wrong information, then we have no way of double checking that. However, we were at an advantage here because we had several existing systems where we had done basically the same exact process when we implemented each of those systems, where we built a proof of concept, we funneled data in, we did constant checks on if the data was accurate. So when we took all of those systems and funneled them into BlueConic, we just had to verify that the data that we were seeing in that system matched what we were seeing in other systems. And then we had to go through a process of doing a data elimination. So when you have several systems that have perhaps the same data point, you have to pick a single point of truth. So mixpanel houses a email address because it picks up on the user profile, but so does Omeda. So which one do we want to say is the one that we want to use for our business case? And we went with Omeda because it's the one that surrounds users as a whole. You can have multiple email addresses with the website, so we needed something that was more unique, and Omeda provided that. So when all of those pieces came in, I worked very, very closely with our senior audience manager, and we literally went through line by line of each of the different data points that we were pulling in, verifying that we were getting the response that we were expecting, and then eliminated the ones that we didn't see as being useful in that system.
And as Kyle mentioned, this requires, it's not like a one and done. We recently on our websites converted from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, and it threw every line of code, for every connection on this out of whack, to where all of a sudden it was maybe 10 people pulling through as journal subscribers. You have to have somebody that knows. I mean, obviously, we know that 10 isn't right, but even knowing that 41,000 wasn't right either, and that something was off, and what do we need to do to, what went out of whack, and how do we get it back on track so that it's you're not missing several days or weeks of data when those things. It can be a sensitive. It doesn't take much to throw things. Would be my observation from our recent Drupal 8 upgrade.
Yeah. And another question for you. How are you, so people are opting out of emails regularly maybe, based on your email tool that you're using. Are you concerned at all that when they get over to BlueConic, if those opt-outs aren't in sync, you might be sending some people some communications, or do you just allow a certain amount of time for that stuff to say, hey, you know what, it'll eventually sync up within a day or two? What was your thoughts around that?
Yeah, we do manage our third-party permissions. That's another reason that's where Omeda is strong. with us around different messages. We have, I don't know, more than 150 different opt-out lists. So in theory, those same things can be applied to other kinds of messaging. We are still so early in our implementation that even some of the use cases that we showed we're not actively running on our site. We've got the Plums. The Plums subscription offer was one of our early tests that Kyle and I just kind of rolled out without just quietly, our own test, and then the New York Vet use case is one that is going. But we should be able to manage. We can pull the third-party permissions field that we track in our OMITA database and use that to exclude messaging through the BlueConic system as well.
That's exactly right. So all of the information that we use to target people in OMITA is funneling into BlueConic, so we can segment against that. And then our API integration with OMITA is set on a 24-hour pull starting at 3 o'clock in the morning. So all of the profile changes, creations that exist in OMITA automatically update at 3 a.m. In BlueConic, so we have the most accurate information as possible. We set 24 hours as our timeline because OMITA, that's how their system exported, so that's the quickest we could get it.
Okay.
Guys, we have several other questions that have come in through the Q&A tab. Just going to start with one that came in, and forgive me if I'm crossing over some of the same ground here, but the question is, why are you running Olytics and BlueConic? I was under the impression that they have many of the same capabilities, particularly in adding web behavior to user profiles.
Right. Yeah, we've been running Olytics for about a year on our sites, and it does pick up, we can track people in two ways, either an unknown site visitor with Olytics data or a known visitor with Olytics data. And we use still OMITA primarily and to build, historically have used the OMITA queries in our database to do our audience segmentations for email lists and different things. So we can query, people who have visited a certain topic and match certain demographic categories also within, the OMITA system. I think that with the addition of BlueConic, the way that I see it working as a complement to this is we'll be able to do even some different segmentations with BlueConic with some fields that we don't have, that we're not picking up with Olytics, but that Olytics data syncs to a specific profile for us that we already have in the database, but I see us pushing segmentations from BlueConic back into the OMITA system that we can then target by email, but run it against the permissions and all the checks that we do there, as kind of I talked about with our opt-out list. So for right now, I see them as complementary. There are some similar functionalities, but we already have a ton of Olytics data that is built up in our system that we're actively using, especially with our clients for third-party email segmentation.
Right, and I would also add on to that there are a lot of systems that do similar things, but you have to go back to what your business case and your goal is, and that will help you define what system to go with. So if you're only really interested in converting unknown to known and then seeing page views or topic behavior, Olytics is great. But if you're trying to use Olytics as a data warehouse, you may have more issues with integrating other pieces of information. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. It really comes down to your business.
Could I ask quickly, are you saying Lytics or Olytics?
Olytics is the OMITA product that allows you to track website behavior.
Right. I mean, Lytics is a competitor to BlueConic.
Right. I know it's a similar name, but Olytics from OMITA. Mm-hmm.
Got it. Thank you.
And then Roberta and Stephanie asked a similar question. So describing the team that worked on the project, and then also what level of staffing is needed to continue. So Natalie mentioned that there were 3 of us working on the project, just kind of in the background while we were working on other things, but this was my primary objective for the last quarter and current quarter. And ongoing is, it's hard to say, because while this is still going to be under my purview as far as the management of it, it really depends on what new use cases we come up with. So our audience manager is always going to work with me to verify data and work on the data. But depending on what we come up with in the future, I may start scaling it back as far as my workload, or I may scale it up. It just all depends on what we want to build.
Mm-hmm. Right. Good.
Great. We've got a couple more questions just want to get through. One of the questions is, how do you estimate response rates and thus determine what you could cut from telemarketing for marketing campaigns you hadn't used in the past, like the targeted on-site pop-ups?
That is a good question, and one that I have not worked through yet. When I was going through my problems that I would like to solve or how I could save money, my telemarketing budget for audience is one of those areas that I would love to be able to cut back. So just to be transparent, I haven't cut anything from my telemarketing budget or traditional audience marketing campaigns yet, but because we are able to pull the profile information, we can see if somebody's up for renewal, in the next 30 days, and can make those messages a little bit more targeted. So if we can cut down any of those that would typically result or need to be contacted by a telemarketer, we hope to see some savings, but that's one that I'll have to provide more details on when we're able to more fully roll it out.
Okay, great. And let's round everything up with this last question here. Can you also talk about how you integrate with traditional web analytics such as Google or Adobe?
Sure. So each of our systems that we have play a role in answering specific questions. Some systems are better at answering questions than others. If I'm just looking at overall page views and overall sessions, then Google Analytics is still a great place to look for that information. Those pieces of data aren't as interesting or vital to us as they once were. We're now interested in more interaction and behavioral information, but Google Analytics still plays a part in how we track raw page views and raw sessions.
Okay. Good. Great.
Well, that's an excellent presentation. So Natalie and Kyle, thank you very much. Folks, if you have additional questions, you can certainly follow up with either myself or Roberta, and we can get that over to Kyle and Natalie as well. We'll also have an archive of this presentation. With that, I think we want to move on briefly, just talk a little bit about what's on your minds. We've got some suggestions for some conversations right here. This can be quick. Any comments that you have, any quick questions that you have. Why don't we start with GDPR prep? I know this is going to be implemented toward the end of May. We've got a little more over a month. Our parent organization, SIA, has done a lot with this, just as far as some webinars and some position papers on preparing for GDPR. But as we get to the end stage here, let's just open up for a general conversation. What are you guys finding at this point? How prepared do you feel that you are?
Well, this is Roberta. I'll start out. So we have already sat down with a law firm that is very well versed in GDPR, and we, watched all of the webinars and joined the conversations that Matt was talking about. We did a preliminary engagement with our first round, really being to summarize where we are at and what we will need to do to get ourselves to May 25th. So it's a high-level look at our practices, our contracts, our terms and conditions, our privacy policy, our data storage. Let's see what else. How much data do we have in the EU versus out in Asia versus in the U.S. And on our technology stack as well, where is the data stored and training. So we are finishing that up probably. I think we're getting the summary of that within the next week, which will then put us into phase 2. And then phase 2 is kind of where the rubber meets the road. It is having a template to go back and standard language to go back to all of our vendors to make sure they are becoming GDPR compliant depending on the relationship and the role of the data. We have yet to elect someone to be the GDPR champion within our organization. And we will then start to look at tools. Are there any tools that we need to purchase to help us monitor the tracking of the permission and the date stamp and the time stamp and the, when people want to take their permission away, right? They want to say, okay, stop communicating with me and stop storing my data. So we're looking at tools that will be in phase 2. And then also a rollout of changes to the terms and conditions and the privacy policies, which will have to be rolled out across the business. And we also implemented already one of those online training programs that your network operations or your IT team usually does. There are those training sessions where everybody in your company learns about spoofing and spam, and so we rolled out a GDPR webinar as well that is mandatory for our employees to take. So that's where we're at, and I feel like we still have a lot of work ahead to get to May 25th.
Great. Thanks, Roberta. Anybody else? How are you guys feeling at this point?
Hey, this is Kyle again from Brief Media. So I'm really excited to share that we are kind of driving home on GDPR. We've been working on this for quite a while. We have a roadmap in place that should meet us at 100% compliance by May 11th is our target deadline. We're a little bit ahead of the game. We've done all of our due diligence as far as reviewing contracts, looking at where our data lives, if our vendors are in compliance or what they're doing to become compliant. We're reviewing our privacy policy right now. And then starting next week, we are, as Roberta said, where rubber meets the road, we're going to start integrating all of the different technology requirements that we need to show for our EU people. So, different consent options, right to be forgotten, right to update, etc. So I feel like this has been, a long year since we've first started seeing it, but I think we're gonna make the deadline no problem, and then we'll continue working on it as new changes to the regulation comes along.
Great. Alrighty.
Well, guys, just in terms of GDPR, for any of you attending the Connectiv CEO Summit in New Orleans next month, representatives from SIA's policy group will be on hand, as well as legal representatives who can talk about any last-minute concerns. Obviously, this is not about crafting a GDPR strategy at that point, but really dealing with any last-minute questions, concerns, and making sure that everyone has their I's dotted and their T's crossed. I think we should just talk briefly about Google Chrome ad standards. I believe Justin Hoffman has joined the call as well. For those of you who remember our last meeting, Justin gave a terrific presentation on the new Google Chrome ad standards, what they are, and how his organization is preparing. Justin, I'm going to throw it out to you quickly. Just any follow-up to that since you spoke last. Anything that you've learned about this? Any different types of formats that your organization has really implemented that really seem to be both abiding by the new standards and performing as well?
Well, I think in general, can you hear me, Matt, first of all? Am I coming through? Okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks. So, I think in general, it was kind of a, let's kind of wait and see what happens kind of scenario. I think everybody, including the folks, here involved, in the digital, group that, preparing for the sites, I think everybody did, as much as we thought we could in terms of ad placements, removing anything that we thought was obstructive in terms of new ad standards and whatnot. And I got to say, since actually the change went through, in the last month or so, there's been very little impact for us, to be quite honest. Our sales team did a really good job, though, I think, of being proactive about this, of really going ahead and removing some of those obtrusive ads, things that maybe were getting out of control. And I'm glad we kind of maybe scared our salespeople from continuing to pitch these things. And I believe the one outstanding change is, we've gone ahead and removed certain creative assets from our media kits that we're no longer going to offer, things that are, specifically like, giant welcome pop-up ads that take up half the screen, auto-playing video, especially that where, you'd go to a website and start hearing sound off the screen, like really obtrusive things like that. So, I think that, just making sure our sites are being as efficient as possible for the users that are there and not really doing anything obtrusive. So far, that's been good for us. No major impacts, which is good. But, maybe just a good standard in general of, for people developing and launching new products that, they keep this in mind, regardless of what the product is, that, ads should be, on the site in such a way where you're not, abusing it. We're not taking up a good portion of your screen, right? 50% of your screen shouldn't be blocked by ads at any point. And I think I've seen this on the web. I don't know if anyone else has noticed that, but obviously I do a ton of reading online, a lot of just basic web New York sites, Daily News, New York Post, New York Times. And I got to say, I've seen a definite difference in a lot of these sites, especially on sites like the Post, that were really kind of out of control with pop-up ads, pop-ups over videos. Some of them are really kind of getting out of control. And I'm glad that a lot of these sites have made some changes. Like, I think on the really sites that were abusing these policies, they were forced to clean it up. And I think that's been the real change. The publishers out there that were really kind of playing nice, there's very little impact here.
Great.
All right. Excellent. Thanks for that update, Justin. And just one last topic on invalid traffic. I'm posing this as a potential topic for a future meeting. I just want to get a little response on this. I know last year we had a terrific meeting with the DMC focused on invalid traffic. We had Dr. Fu and also Justin talked a little bit about what they've seen in this area and some of the steps that they've taken to combat that. I think at the time people said, oh, that's interesting. Does this really apply to us? Since then we've heard about multiple fairly well-known B2B brands that have found out that a really large percentage of their traffic is in fact invalid. So this is happening and it's something that we need to be concerned about. So I'm wondering if that's something that we want to revisit for a future meeting, perhaps have Dr. Fu back, but really talk about how to check on your traffic, how to be aware of whether or not you have any invalid traffic and what you can do about that.
Yeah, this is Roberta. I think that's a great topic. I mean, and it's not even just about your traffic. When you're switching ad servers, like we did last year, some of that non-human traffic bubbles up also because it affects your ad impressions. So it's definitely a great topic and challenging to be a little bit proactive rather than reactive. So I would welcome that topic as well.
Okay. Any other feedback?
No, this is Justin. I think it's a good one to bring up on. It is kind of a hot topic still, within my organization. And I think there's been some updates in the industry too that are worth, sharing. The short and sweet version of it is that, and this has kind of exploded, right, in the last year. So there's been a lot of new vendors that have come out, out of the shadows that are doing this kind of work. And the big one for me is that, in the last year, Oracle purchased a company called Moat. I don't know if you guys know what Moat is, but Moat is basically a vendor that in the past has only been used for viewability metrics, and they've recently gotten an accreditation with invalid traffic, and they now include this with their services. With the Oracle funding and backing, they've come a long way with their competitors. So, if anyone's interested, I highly recommend take a look at that product, but I think it's a great topic for a follow-up meeting.
All right, terrific. Roberta, Justin, our full group, any other topics, anything keeping you up at night right now?
No, it's, we're looking at, making sure because we just put in NetSuite, a new ERP system, which has some materials trafficking along with it. So we are now going through the process of, going back and looking at our workflow from client contact all the way through to delivery. So hopefully, improving upon that and streamlining that and being able to use some of the features and functionality in the NetSuite system. So that's what we're doing now. Anybody else? Okay.
All right, good. Well, just as an FYI, I think it's been a terrific presentation today and a pretty good discussion. As we go forward, we're going to be looking for more ways to have these be face-to-face meetings. So we did one last year in Chicago. That went very well. But thinking about doing some more face-to-face meetings in New York and Washington, D.C., and some other markets, particularly as we see so many topics that really overlap the different Connectiv committees like Digital Media Council, Audience Marketing, Editorial and Content. So stay tuned. We certainly welcome your feedback and your suggestions on that, but we want to give you guys a chance to be together face-to-face. And with that, just to wrap up, some of the things that we've got coming up next week, our sister association, AM&P, that's Association Media and Publishing. They're going to be hosting a breakfast and learn in New York on April 16th. They're going to be talking about some of their new research focused on the association publishing sector. So many of you are partners for the industry. If you're interested, you can certainly copy the link or reach out to me, and we can give you more information on that. That's certainly open to Connectiv members as well. We also have a webinar on April 19th on Native Done Right, how to sell fewer ads and make more money. Kiplinger is going to be offering a case study on how they're really able to cut down on their display inventory and boost overall revenue and CPMs via native. They're also going to be talking about how they've been able to sustain renewals on native advertising, which has been a sore spot for a lot of different publishers. In May, next month, we have the Connectiv CEO Summit. This is open to people beyond CEOs as well, although it's typically an upper-level audience there. This is going to be in New Orleans. Just on a social note, New Orleans is celebrating its 300th anniversary this year, and the Jazz Festival actually kicks off that weekend on May 11th, so I think it could be a pretty wild time. And then finally, just save the date. The Business Information and Media Summit is going to be held in Fort Lauderdale, November 12th, November 14th, and we'll be releasing an agenda for that shortly. So with that, I'd just like to again thank Natalie and Kyle. Terrific job. We do have an archive of this presentation. We'll be able to send that out to all our attendees today. Your colleagues can access that as well. And also like to thank Roberta and Justin Hoffman for their help today as well.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks very much, everyone. Tongue-tied there today. Have a great week.
All right.
Thanks, Roberta.
Take care.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you. Please stand by.